I want to first say thank you so much for all the loving and wonderful comments on my Goodbye to Final Fantasy XIV video. It really was nice to sit down and read and have those discussions and get that input and get that insight from the wider Final Fantasy XIV community. So thank you guys so much for being so loving and so, I guess, generous with your time. And hopefully you guys understand my reasonings behind it. Now, there's a couple other things that came up in that video, number of things. One of the things a lot of people are reacting to that video specifically. I've been getting those sent to me, DM'd to me. I haven't seen any of them yet. And my thought is that, you know what, I'm gonna go hang out on Twitch tomorrow. Link will be in the description tomorrow night, and we'll work our way through the reactions. I can help answer any questions that you guys might have, or we can discuss any points that you guys feel needed a little bit more value. But the kind of other third idea came down to why New World? Why is New World so good? What is it doing that Final Fantasy XIV isn't doing? And so I thought I would take today, and actually this video, to kind of break that down and kind of the 5 reasons why I feel New World is giving me what I want and what I need in an MMO, where Final Fantasy XIV has been falling short. And they've been falling short for a long time. This isn't to say that you're wrong for liking Final Fantasy. Still highly encourage anybody who wants to check out Final Fantasy to check out the game. Final Fantasy XIV with Endwalker feels like a complete journey for me. And will they invite me back into another round? Time will tell. And that's what that video is about. But to dive into more specifically what New World is doing, I thought this video would actually make the most sense. So guys, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, comments, always here for you. You can sound off below or hang out in Discord, or see you hopefully tomorrow over on Twitch for the live reactions to all of that crazy chaos that apparently kicked off this week. So anyway, let's dive in. I think it's incredibly important to preface every bit of feedback that I give in an MMO to what I feel an MMO is, and that comes from Final Fantasy XI. Final Fantasy XI was my entry point. It defined a good chunk of my life prior to Final Fantasy XIV, and even the irony or the humor in all of it is that New World really delivers on what Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 missed the mark on. Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 actually has a lot of what I'm going to share with you today, but it really didn't capitalize on it, and for good reason. And when I follow the development, when I've been following the game since Project Rapture, it ends up being a lot of time invested. And the thing a lot of people end up missing is what was going on during the time, especially in Japanese game development. And there was a lot of fears about people dying and losing their lives in these online games. And so Final Fantasy XIV kind of, its development cycle grew up among these restrictions and fears that were being, capitalized by news media at the time. So it's really interesting to see how that played out, because I wish Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 kept a lot of what I'm going to share with you, and maybe one day it will. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't, that's perfectly fine. It is. There's nothing, I as a software engineer myself, I fully get that what I have always stated in terms of feedback is a big ask, even if it sounds simple. And that's usually where a lot of friction in development and feedback come into play, where it's the assumption that things are simple when reality-wise they're going to take a long time to implement, and they might not be with the direction and the values of that. But the first things first, so you guys understand, you've heard me argue this many times if you've been following the content for any point in time, but just to rehash it all here, a player-driven economy. A player-driven economy is essential to what makes an MMORPG an MMORPG. You don't have to agree, but that is my definition. That's something that I always look for. Why is that? What does that do for us as players? It removes some of this mindless restriction between, or friction between, the casual and the hardcore player. The casual player benefits the hardcore player because they're out gathering and crafting and providing services and goods, where the hardcore player could take advantage of it. In the modern MMO, especially with the subscription, the casual player makes up 99%, I'm making up a number, of the revenue that these games take to run, so that the hardcore player can have some hardcore content. And what I've seen happen over the course, especially the last 10 years, more friction between the two, where in a player-driven economy, economics really solves a lot of player friction, because it ends up giving value to every action. Not the same value, but every action has a value, to a casual player and to a hardcore player. The reference or the hardcore player value to a casual is something to aspire to. It always gives you something to chase. And the value that the casual player brings to the hardcore is not just in finances for the game, but it's also in-game economy and items, keeping things at a relatively fixed or low cost ultimately. Now, bots obviously play an issue. Now, is a player-driven economy the perfect solution? No. That's always going to be something that struggles in the long term and the short term if the developers don't manage that. And so it is a resource intensive thing to do in terms of its design and its function. So it's not an easy solution, but I really love that New World has a player-driven economy because it makes your own quests. Like, man, you tell me that it would be so cool to say, right click achievement lock, right click this and turn that into a quest in either of these games. I think that would be amazing. And same concept that goes into it. Like when we use garlic as an example, garlic likes to fluctuate in price in New World. It's a valuable resource used in a lot of different things. And sometimes the price gets really high on garlic. What does that end up doing? It makes people go out and actually gather garlic. You might not want to go gather garlic, and that's perfectly fine, but a lot of people find a lot of value. And being that you can use gold, and being that gold is a power in New World, it allows you to participate in any number of things, gearing up and progression, for example. So sometimes if you just have a little bit of time, you might want to go gather some garlic, make a lot of money off of doing so, and then maybe getting that sword or that shield or that piece of gear that you've been wanting, and you just haven't had time to invest in running expeditions over and over again. So a player-driven economy opens up the game to multiple different avenues. It adds value to any action that you take, and that action and that value is going to scale one way or the other. But again, it's a player-driven choice that gives you that value. So you can choose to opt in, you can choose to completely opt out. The choice is yours. And that ties into number 2, player choice, player builds, being able to really define your character. This is one of the things that is obviously missing from Final Fantasy XIV 1.0, and we've seen it become more curated and streamlined due to balance, and I understand why. I get it as a game designer and I get it as a player why these choices were made, but it's really such a beautiful thing that in New World you can step in, you can pick whatever weapons suit you, you can have your own crazy build, you can pick your stats, you can focus in on your perks. You in a way can define what is best in slot for you and best in slot for your team. In fact, there's always going to be a meta in all these games. A lot of people argue that choice is delusional, but that usually is coupled with modern MMOs in which matchmaking really has a massive impact and a massive cost to the social infrastructure, to essentially the choice of players, and to the content that they get match made into. All of these things are what we're sacrificing for matchmaking, and I'm really proud that New World hasn't adopted that, because if it ever does, outside of like PvP matchmaking, but in terms of a PvE content, the content's going to have to suffer, your player choice is going to have to suffer, and the community will suffer, all for the sake of this level of convenience. Now, they brought in tools like a group finder. Final Fantasy XIV's party finder is by far the pinnacle here. So Final Fantasy XIV takes it and cakes the party finder, and I hope that New World continues to draw inspiration from Final Fantasy XIV's party finder, and it sounds like they are. That seems like the feedback that they've gotten, and I think that's going to ultimately help things out, especially with cross-server play coming to New World. First with OPR, but then we'll hopefully see it continue to make its way into the game, which will help alleviate server issues and various different balance structures and power structures within. Now, the third thing ties all of this together. Social, and the world is breathtaking. The game is a very social game, and this is in part because of player building and because of the player-driven economy, but it's also in the core game isn't pure instance simulator. Now, Final Fantasy XIV has an open world, and you participate in that open world maybe a few times, and then maybe you go and do a beast tribe or a tribal quest in one of the zones. But in New World, it's all integrated. You have open world dungeons and you have the instance expeditions. I like that they have a balance between the two, and my personal fear and my feedback to the devs will always be, don't introduce a raid without introducing an open world raid. New World has an open world raid. In fact, you can do all these different things that ends up being quite fun and engaging, but the UI really isn't there yet. So with a raid coming to New World, I think that's going to be something interesting to see. how that then also bleeds into the core gameplay that happens in the open world. My feedback is usually always directed at open world. That is a big aspect of Final Fantasy XI to me, and I hope that we can also draw inspiration from what made Final Fantasy XI great. I'd love to see Final Fantasy XI features brought into Final Fantasy XIV, but that's also one of those really big asks that really isn't practical unless they decided just to make a brand new MMORPG, and that's what I am hoping for when it comes to the world of Final Fantasy Online. Whatever Yoshi P decides to do, I'm rooting for him. I think it's going to be a really interesting journey. Now, when it comes down to number 4, crafters are actually able to make best in slot. This plays into the player-driven economy. This plays into the content that you can then partake in, and it plays into the gold is power. This aspect alone allows you, the player, to choose how you want to progress down the road. Do you want to dive into the hardest content, or do you want to focus in on trying to make the economy work? This really does feel like a key pillar and aspect of MMOs that has gone missing for some time, where you think of like social, you think of hard content, you think of, like open world content, you think of crafting and gathering. I, for the longest time, never could really understand why anybody would invest so much time into crafting and gathering in Final Fantasy XIV. Yes, you can make money, but money has a limit. And yes, there's catch-up gear, but it's never going to be on par. But then all the different counter arguments aside only just end up frustrating me, because it all, in my mind, defeats the purpose. It misses the point. Who cares what you're like? Who cares how you go about to getting to the end goal? But that, I think, is something that bleeds in from World of Warcraft, and I don't think that's a good thing for the genre as a whole. I think WoW, for all that it's brought into the genre and all that it's pioneered, not all of it's great, and I don't think that's one aspect that's great. I love that New World allows crafters to be able to compete on that stage. I like that materials or that drives value and things like that. Could it be better? Absolutely, it always could be better. But all that being said, takes into number 5. The balance between the instance and the open world content. I talked about this already throughout this entire thing, but to be able to run around this world that is breathtaking and it's engaging and it's dangerous, and at the same time, it also still allows you to have a solo level of play. Being able to see people out in the open world, never really feeling alone, even if you're feeling a little bit isolated or you're trying to escape from the busyness of the various different cities and city life within the game. It does feel connected. You see chat going off. You can mute chat if you want, if you don't want to be a part of that, but you can see that conversation going on, and it's truly, truly breathtaking to see. Sometimes funny, and you end up having these cultures and these people that you see over and over again that you start to actually build relationships with and bonds with, that they're all going and trying to farm up different things. You end up teaming up more naturally than ever before, and the instance content, I think, in this game is some of the best instance content. The expeditions are so powerful and so interesting, and they absolutely smash 14 in this regards, because 14 has the philosophy that the goal is to win, and everything's really structured around that victory. And in New World, it's not guaranteed. There's no guarantee that you will win and clear the expedition, but you're still actually rewarded completely along the way, so it never feels like you wasted your time. And it also doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're gonna win. And we've gone in multiple times on the expeditions I've cleared easily before, but we're taking new players through. Maybe they're not at the right power level. It doesn't restrict us in that regards. It allows us the freedom to fail. And I think that's really a critical aspect to the success of New World. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm attracted to it as a gameplay design. Now, I did not list this. PvP. I did not talk about PvP in this video until this point for a reason. Is I think Final Fantasy XIV's PvP, especially with Crystalline Conflict, is incredible. It's truly some of the best work that I think Yoshi P and his team has done in the game to date. I think New World definitely needs to keep investing in that. And I've given feedback regarding open world PvP, incentives for that, kind of a hot zone or something like that would rotate each every week. Those are just some examples. And the PvP that they have in New World, I actually really enjoy the PvP in New World. And so for this one, it doesn't do it better, it doesn't do it worse. Like, it's going to be all about your matter of preference in terms of that. And I think Final Fantasy XIV definitely, with Crystalline Conflict, wins that mode. And if they ever brought something like that into a New World, I think that'd be a real big win. That'd be really exciting to see. But New World does have some things that I think, especially in open world, that I wish Final Fantasy would do. So it's a really kind of a split point between the two. And PvP is obviously a hot topic because some people don't even want it. Some people think New World's an always PvP open game, and that's not how it is at all. So I know that there's some misconceptions, and also people think about dueling as open world PvP, and there's misconceptions around there. So it gets to be a tricky topic in any community that you talk about it, because there are people who have really hot opinions about this, whether it's a easy yes or a hard no, one way or the other. It's going to be what it is. Now, that's what I want to sit down and talk to you guys today about in terms of New World, and why I think that it is doing a much better job than Final Fantasy XIV is doing. There's a lot of, things that we didn't talk about, and we could talk about those in later videos if you guys are so inclined, but I'm not here to waste your time and fill your feed with things that you're not interested in. And so feel free to let me know in the comments. Feel free to engage with the video any way that you want. Anything does help in this regards. It's always kind of the humorous thing about it. To me, in my perspective. So guys, you're awesome. Thanks for being here. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully I'll see you next time. But until then, take care.